Late September, 9 of our era. The Saltus Tuderbergiensis. The rain does not wash the forest clean. It only turns the blood-soaked soil into a thick crimson mud that clings to your boots and greaves. You are here, in the gloom of the ancient German woods, and the air is heavy with the scent of pine, wet earth, and death. For 3 days, this narrow, treacherous track between the bog and the hills has been an abattoir. 3 Roman legions, the 17th, the 18th, and the 19th, have ceased to exist. Their standards, the sacred golden aquilae, are now trophies for the victorious tribes. Listen. The roar of battle has faded, replaced by a sound more chilling in its intimacy. The groans of the dying, both Roman and German, a chorus of misery that the endless trees seem to mock with their silence. Crows, grown bold, caw from branches heavy with mist, their black eyes surveying a feast beyond reckoning. Through this grim tableau walks a man named Inguiomer, a chieftain of the Cherusci. He is not a giant, not a berserker of sagas. He is of average height, with a broad chest and arms corded with the muscle of a life spent with a spear and a shield. His long blonde hair is matted with sweat and rain, and his eyes, the color of a winter sky, hold no joy of victory. They hold only a cold, calculating weariness. He steps carefully over the twisted bodies of his own warriors and his foes, his movements economical, his expression unreadable. He is not alone. A younger warrior, his nephew, follows a pace behind, his shield dented, his spear tip still dark with Roman blood. "We have broken them, uncle," the young man says, his voice raw with a triumph Inguiomer does not seem to share. "The proconsul Varus is dead. The eagles are ours." Inguiomer stops and rests a hand on the slick black bark of an oak. He looks not at his nephew, but into the tangled morass of the battlefield. He sees a cart, its axle shattered, spilling scrolls of papyrus into the mud, the records of an army, the meticulous bureaucracy of Rome, now dissolving into pulp. He sees a legionary, his face a mask of terror frozen in death, his hand still clenched around the hilt of his short, vicious gladius. He sees the tools of an empire laid low. Shattered supply wagons, discarded engineering tools, the expensive Lorica segmentata armor pried from corpses. "We have broken these men," Inguiomer corrects, his voice a low rumble. Rome is not broken." His gaze scans the carnage, moving from one fallen officer to the next. He is looking for something specific, not for gold, not for a jewel-hilted dagger, but for a symbol of the machine he has just fought. His eyes land on a figure half submerged in a rain-filled ditch. The man's armor marks him as an officer, his transverse crest of horsehair now a sodden plume of brown and red. A centurion of the 17th. His face is turned away, but one arm is thrown wide, his centurion's vine staff lying broken nearby. But it is the man's headwear that catches Inguiomer's attention. It is a helmet, a galea. Unlike the simpler bowls worn by the legionaries, this one is more ornate, yet brutally functional. It has been knocked from the centurion's head in his final moments and now sits, almost pristine, on a patch of moss beside him. The rain has washed the worst of the gore from its polished iron surface, which gleams with a dull, menacing light in the forest twilight. Inguiomer gestures with his chin. "That one. Bring it to me." His nephew hesitates, looking at the dead Roman. "It is just a helmet, uncle." "Bring it," Inguiomer repeats, his tone leaving no room for argument. The young warrior wades into the ditch, his boots making a sickening sucking sound in the mud. He retrieves the helmet, handling it as if it might still bite. He brings it to the chieftain, holding it out with 2 hands. Water streams from the neck guard and cheek pieces. Inguiomer does not take it immediately. He stares at it, this piece of sculpted metal, this product of a distant world. In its curved surfaces, he sees a distorted reflection of the dark, dripping forest and his own grim face. This was more than a helmet. It was an artifact. It was the mind of his enemy, forged in iron. Inguiomer finally reaches out and takes the helmet. The weight of it surprises him. It is substantial, solid, but not cumbersome. He has held German helmets, Spangenhelms forged from segments of iron riveted to a frame. They were effective, but they felt handmade. Each one was a testament to the skill of a single smith, its flaws and strengths unique. This was different. The cold iron feels impossibly smooth beneath his calloused fingertips. He turns it over and over in his hands, his warrior's mind deconstructing it piece by piece, trying to understand the thought process of its creator. He runs a thumb along the reinforced brow guard, a thick ridge of iron just above where the eyes would be. It's an obvious feature, designed to deflect a downward sword stroke, to turn a killing blow into a glancing one. But it is the execution that is so remarkable. The curve is perfect, a flawless arc forged to channel the force of an impact away from the skull. There are no hammer marks, no ripples of uneven metal. It looks as though it was poured from a mold like molten bronze, yet it has the hard, gray resilience of well-worked iron. His attention moves to the cheek pieces, the bucculi, hanging from their hinges. He flicks one with his finger. The joint is a marvel of miniaturized engineering, a small, precisely fitted pin and loop. It allows the guard to swing freely, to be tied securely beneath the chin, but it does not rattle or feel loose. The plates themselves are shaped to the human jaw, protecting it from a side slash, while leaving the mouth clear to shout orders. A small gap is left for the ears. The Roman who designed this understood the clamor of the shield wall. He knew a centurion needed to protect his face, but he needed to hear his men and be heard by them even more. Then he sees the rivets. They're everywhere, securing the crest holder, pinning the hinges, reinforcing the edges. And they are all identical. Each domed head is the same size, the same shape, the same distance from its neighbors. This is not the work of a man with a hammer and a good eye. This is the work of a system of mass production that stretched from the ore mines of Hispania to the forges of Gaul, all working to a single master design. This helmet was not a unique item. There were tens of thousands just like it, each one a perfect, lethal copy of the last. The thought is staggering. His own tribe could not arm 100 warriors with such uniformity. Rome could arm legions. Inguiomer tilts the helmet, studying the long, elegantly sloped neck guard. It extends far back, a solid plate designed to stop a sword aimed at the exposed spine as a soldier bent to stab with his gladius. He traces its edge, sharp enough to be a weapon itself. It would not hinder movement. A man could look up to see a threat on a ridge, or down to watch his footing on broken ground, and the guard would move with him, a shell of iron protecting his most vulnerable point. It was a perfect synthesis of protection and mobility, a balance struck not by chance, but by generations of trial, error, and brutal battlefield experience. Every curve, every angle, every rivet was a lesson paid for in Roman blood. He turns the helmet completely over, peering into its dark, hollow interior. The rain has washed it clean, but he can see the faint traces of the liner, the leather and padded wool that would have cushioned the centurion's skull. This wasn't just an iron pot. It was designed to be worn for weeks on end on the march from the dusty plains of Syria to the damp forests of Germania. It was made for comfort as much as for war, because a comfortable soldier is an efficient soldier, and the Roman state prized efficiency above all else. This helmet was not merely armor. It was an instrument of imperial policy, a tool of conquest refined to an inhuman level of perfection. For the first time, looking at this single mundane object, Inguiomer feels a chill that the forest rain could not deliver. He understands that they have not just defeated an army. They have picked a fight with a factory. The young nephew watches, his brow furrowed in confusion, as Inguiomer lifts the helmet. It is an unsettling gesture. To wear the gear of a dead enemy is not something a warrior does lightly. It is an act that can invite vengeful spirits, a taboo. But Inguiomer is not driven by superstition. He is driven by a cold, desperate need to understand. He turns the helmet, aligns it with his head, and slowly, deliberately, lowers it into place. The cold ring of iron against his skull is a shock. The interior, stripped of its padding, is unforgiving. For a moment, the world goes dark and loud as the metal scrapes over his ears. Then, it settles, and the forest is gone. Or rather, the forest has been remade. The world is now a rectangle of gray-green gloom, framed by the dark iron of the brow ridge and the cheek guards. His peripheral vision is gone, not blocked, but rendered irrelevant. The design of the helmet funnels his gaze forward, forcing him to confront what is directly in front of him. The tangled mess of the battlefield, the bodies and the broken shields, are no longer a panoramic tragedy. They are a tactical problem to be solved. His vision, his very perception, has been weaponized. He turns his head. The movement is fluid, effortless. The helmet's weight is so perfectly distributed that it feels like an extension of his own skeleton. It does not pull or strain the neck. He can look down to check his footing, then snap his head up to meet a threat, and the iron shell moves with him, a seamless part of his own body. He feels an incredible sense of security, of being encased in a personal fortress. The rain, which had been a constant chilling presence on his skin and hair, is now just a dull, rhythmic drumming on the dome above him. The wind no longer whispers past his ears. He can only hear its low moan as it finds the edges of his iron shell. He takes a breath, and the air inside the helmet is close, smelling of cold iron and faintly of the dead Roman who wore it last, the ghost of sweat and leather. This enclosed space changes not just sight and sound, but the very feeling of being in the world. He feels detached, insulated from the chaos outside. He imagines standing in a shield wall, the man to his left, the man to his right, each encased in the same iron shell, seeing the same focused rectangle of combat, hearing the same drumming of arrows on their helmets. This helmet does not encourage individual heroism or wild, frenzied charges. It does the opposite. It imposes discipline. It erases the man and replaces him with the soldier. It makes you a component, a single, interchangeable piece in a vast, grinding engine of war. The Germanic furor, the battle madness that his own people prized, would be useless in here. This helmet demands a cold rage, a patient and methodical application of violence. "Uncle?" His nephew's voice cuts through his reverie, sounding distant and slightly distorted as if coming from another world. "Why do you wear it? It is the helm of a dead man." Inguiomer does not answer immediately. He is listening to the ghost of another voice, the clipped, authoritative Latin of the centurion. "Signa infere. Advance the standards. Gladios stringe. Draw swords." The helmet was built to hear those commands, to obey them without question. With a grunt, he grips the cheek guards and lifts the helmet off. The world rushes back in a dizzying flood of light, sound, and sensation. The full, panoramic horror of the forest returns. The cold rain is on his face again. The smell of blood is sharp in his nostrils. He feels exposed, vulnerable, naked. He looks down at the piece of iron in his hands, no longer just a piece of captured armor. It is a key that had, for a fleeting moment, unlocked the mind of his enemy. He had worn the centurion's face, and for a moment he had glimpsed the centurion's soul, a soul forged not of passion, but of iron, discipline, and the unshakable certainty of empire. Inguiomer holds the helmet out to his nephew, the gesture heavy with meaning. "Put it on." The young warrior recoils slightly, his eyes wide. "No, uncle. It is bad luck. The spirit of the Roman is still attached to it." "The spirit is not what you should fear," Inguiomer says, his voice flat. He thrusts the helmet forward again, an order, not a request. "You need to understand what we fought, not just the man, but the mind that made him. Put it on." Hesitantly, the young warrior takes the cold iron. He looks from his uncle's impassive face to the dark, hollow space of the helmet, and then, with a deep breath, he lowers it over his head. The effect is immediate. His confident posture stiffens. His movements become jerky and uncertain as he tries to reacquaint himself with a world so suddenly and brutally framed. He turns his head left, then right, the motion clumsy. "What do you see?" Inguiomer asks. I see the path," the nephew stammers, his voice muffled by the metal. "Only the path. The trees. They are just walls. I cannot see the sky unless I look straight up." "You see what a legionary is meant to see," Inguiomer explains, circling him like a wolf studying its prey. "The man in front of you, the ground beneath your feet, the shield of your comrade beside you. Nothing else matters. Nothing else is permitted to matter." He taps a finger sharply against the side of the helmet. The resulting clang makes his nephew flinch violently. What do you hear? A ringing. Nothing but a ringing. Exactly. An arrow, a thrown spear, a rock from a sling. It is not a threat to your life. It is just noise. It is a distraction from your task. Your task, Inguiomer continues, his voice rising with a grim intensity, is to hold the line, to take one step forward, to thrust with your gladius, and to do it again and again, until your centurion tells you to stop. He walks back in front of his nephew, peering into the dark slit of the visor. This helmet is not for a warrior. It is for a cog in a machine. We fought men today, but we were fighting the machine that made them, a machine that stretches all the way back to the Tiber River. The nephew struggles to lift the helmet off, his hands fumbling with the unfamiliar shape. When he finally pulls it free, his face is pale, his eyes unsettled. He looks at the helmet with a newfound awe and terror, as if it were a venomous creature. Inguiomer takes it back, its weight now feeling more profound than ever. He looks past the carnage of the battlefield, his mind's eye traveling south. He pictures the workshops in northern Italy, in Gaul, where thousands of craftsmen, slaves, and freedmen toil. He sees the organized chaos of the forges, the rhythmic pounding of 100 hammers striking in unison, shaping identical sheets of iron. He sees the inspectors with their measuring tools, discarding any piece that deviates by a fraction of an inch from the master template. He sees the quartermasters with their wax tablets and styluses, logging every crate of helmets, every bundle of spearheads, every pair of hobnailed sandals. Caligay. He imagines the supply lines, the great paved roads that Rome drove through forests and over mountains like iron nails, securing their grip on the land. Along these roads, a relentless river of materiel flowed, grain from Egypt, iron from Spain, leather from Gaul, all converging on the frontier garrisons to feed, clothe, and arm the legions. This helmet, resting in his hands in the heart of a German forest, was the final product of that colossal, continent-spanning enterprise. It was the endpoint of a logistical chain so vast and complex it was almost beyond comprehension. The Cherushi, the Chatti, the Bructeri, they had won a great victory. They had ambushed and annihilated 3 legions. They had proven that Roman soldiers could be beaten, could be killed. But in doing so, they had merely swatted a hornet from the nest. And now, the entire nest was stirring. Inguiomer knew that somewhere to the south, a messenger on a lathered horse was already galloping toward Rome with news of the disaster. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, what the response would be. New legions would be raised, new forges would be fired, a new river of iron and men would flow north. They had not defeated Rome. They had only made it angry. This helmet wasn't just a trophy. It was a warning. Inguiomer turns away from his nephew, cradling the helmet in the crook of his arm. The weight is a comfort now, a solid, tangible piece of the puzzle he is trying to assemble in his mind. He walks deeper into the woods, away from the main path of slaughter, needing silence to process the cascade of revelations this single object has unleashed. He finds a small clearing where an ancient oak, struck by lightning years ago, has fallen, its moss-covered trunk forming a natural bench. He sits, the wet wood cold through his leather trousers, and places the helmet on his knee. He looks at it not as a warrior anymore, but as a chieftain, a leader responsible for the lives of his people. He had stood in the war council of his kinsman, Arminius. He had listened to Arminius, who had served in the Roman army, who held Roman citizenship. Speak of Roman weakness. Arminius had spoken of Varus's arrogance, of the legions being strung out and vulnerable in the dense forest, burdened by a long baggage train. Arminius had been right. His plan, a masterful piece of deception and guerrilla strategy, had worked perfectly. They had used the terrain, their knowledge of the forest, and the element of surprise to achieve a victory that would be sung about in their longhouses for 100 generations. But Arminius had not spoken of this. He had not described the cold, relentless logic forged into every piece of Roman steel. He had spoken of breaking the legions, but had he truly understood the nature of the thing he was trying to break? Or had his time among the Romans blinded him, made him see them as mere men who could be outsmarted? Inguiomer runs his hand over the helmet's cool dome. This was not the creation of arrogant men. Arrogance leads to over-ornamentation, to useless flourishes. This helmet was the epitome of brutal humility. It was a confession of vulnerability. It was an admission that a soldier's head was soft and easily broken, so it must be protected. It acknowledged that his vision must be focused, that his hearing must be shielded from the terror of battle, that his neck was a target. Every feature of its design was a response to a battlefield reality, a lesson learned from 1,000 fatal mistakes on 100 different frontiers. This was the terrifying genius of Rome. They did not see defeat as a shame to be hidden. They saw it as data. They would study this battle. They would dissect their own failure with a surgeon's dispassionate precision. They would learn from the ambush, from the terrain, from the tactics the tribes had used, and they would adapt. The next Roman army to march into these woods would not be the same. Their commanders would be more cautious. Their formations would be different. Their equipment, perhaps even their helmets, would be modified, improved, made even more lethally efficient. He thinks of his own people. They fought for glory, for honor, for their clans. Their courage was a fire, burning bright and hot, but fire eventually consumes its fuel. Rome's strength was not fire. It was stone. It was patient, implacable, and it could wait. It could lose an army, 2 armies, 3, and it would simply quarry more stone and build again. How do you fight an enemy who learns from every wound you inflict? How do you achieve a lasting victory against an empire that treats warfare not as a clash of heroes, but as an engineering problem to be solved? A profound sense of dread settles over Inguiomer. They had won the battle, but in doing so, they had started a war they could not possibly win. Not like this. Their victory today was the equivalent of tearing down a single Roman aqueduct. It was a painful, expensive loss for the empire, but ultimately, it was a temporary disruption. The source of the water, Rome itself, remained untouched, and its engineers were already drawing up plans for a newer, stronger replacement.